способ.
Я научу тебя жить по-человечески.
Способ выловить сундуки, карты, способ подать сигнал кораблям. Оставалось только одно.
Ты научишь меня видеть ветер, Арман?
Преодолеть заклятие острова, что мешает уплыть.
Арман, я же не думала, что...
Я тебя не виню. Все правильно. Ты должна меня бояться. Завтра на рассвете ты сядешь в лодку, поднимешь парус.
Уходи! А как же новый человек? Помнишь, я ведь нужна ему!
Здесь ты нужна только дракону!
This is the type of fantasy romance movie that teenage me would have killed to have grown up with. But instead, all I got was Twilight.
Уходи!
And yes, I'm still salty about it. Hey there stranger, my name is miizmi, and once a week I make videos discussing movies I find particularly interesting. And this week I want to talk about one of my favorite romance movies, the hidden gem that is Drakon, Russian fantasy Beauty and the Beast movie that's basically the new and improved version of Twilight. With a more convincing love story, interesting characters, and a male lead that isn't a walking, talking embodiment of toxic masculinity. So, in short, everything that Twilight aspired to be and yet failed miserably at. That's not to say that this movie is perfect or without flaws by any means, because like so many other movies and novels in the young adult genre, they include and almost romanticize darker subject matters such as kidnapping, suicide in the name of love, and culty sacrificial rituals. That being said, this movie deals with them better than most, and at the very least sets them in a scene where these actions, while not justifiable, at least make somewhat sense contextually. So with all that being said, let me go ahead and give you a quick rundown of the plot before we delve deeper into analyzing the characters and story in comparison to Twilight. Although knowing me, it's not going to be all that short because I have a tendency to ramble, but I'll give it my best try. The movie begins with a shadow puppet show in which the narrator explains that the people of the land live in terror of a ferocious dragon, and in order to appease the beast, they have routinely sacrificed their women, pushing them out to the middle of the lake in boats as they sing the ritual song to summon the dragon to let it take its pick. This horrible tradition continues for generations until the fiancé of a knight is taken, and to avenge his love, the knight tirelessly travels across land and sea until he fells the beast and becomes known as the heroic dragon slayer. For many years afterwards, there is peace and tranquility, and the once dreadful ritual becomes a wedding tradition in which the bride is sent out in a boat full of jewelry and gifts that the groom pulls ashore. In present day, Igor, grandson of the dragon slayer, is to be married to Mira, the younger daughter of the Duke, and decides to have his men chant the ritual song in honor of his grandfather and ends up summoning a dragon that takes off with Mira. Mira is taken to the dragon's island and thrown into a pit where she meets a mysterious man, Arman, who brings her herbs to heal her wounds but refuses to help her escape, claiming that the dragon is too powerful. She's able to escape from the pit on her own, running from the dragon and chase onto a ledge where Arman suspiciously appears once again, and Mira figures out that he is the dragon. In her panic and confusion, she falls off the ledge, and Arman dives after her, transforming into the dragon at the last moment to break their fall. Mira wakes up to find an injured Arman and struggles with how to get rid of him, ultimately deciding to spare his life and drags him to safety, building a shelter for the two of them as it storms. The next day, she wakes up under warm blankets and a lit fireplace, and sparks Arman's machine. He reveals that the dragon is an entity that he cannot control, and after gaining the memories of all his dragon ancestors, he realized what monsters they were and isolated himself from the world, running into a crevice in the rocks when the urge to transform overcame him, so the dragon could not escape and harm others. However, on the day of her wedding, when the ritual song was sung, the dragon took over before he could trap it, and he was only momentarily able to regain enough consciousness to release her into the pit so the dragon could not reach her. He urges her to return to the pit for her own safety while they wait for the dragon slayer to come, and once he arrives, Arman will not stop them from leaving as he has no desire to harm anyone. However, Mira believes that he is beginning to gain control of the dragon as he is yet to transform, and decides that while they wait, she'll teach him how to live as a human to further strengthen his control. As they soar through the shipwreck and redecorate the living area, the two develop an affectionate bond for one another, with Mira gifting him a flute-like instrument and teaches him a soothing lullaby while he gives her fireworks to commemorate a new beginning. The two grow closer as they get to know each other, but despite her flourishing affections, Mira is still terrified of the dragon and plagued by nightmares. Meanwhile, Arman struggles with the dragon, and after holding off her transformation, he finds Mira's hidden boat and realizes she'd been using him to gain access to material and knowledge to get off the island. In his anger and hurt, Arman confronts Mira, who tries to explain, but instead he tells her that she's right to be afraid of him, revealing that dragons are born from the ashes of the sacrificed women as they are burned alive with dragon fire to scare her into leaving, and confines herself into the crevice so she can sail away. Meanwhile, Igor and his men had set sail to save Mira, but were stuck in perpetual fog as the island is actually the remains of an ancient dragon and doomed sailors to roam into death unless they have a woman's love to lead them to the island. Igor is fed up waiting for a sign and wants to head home when Mira sets off the fireworks and is taken aboard as they sail home. There, she prepares to be wed to Igor again while Arman decides to permanently make sure the dragon can never harm Mira and jumps off the cliff, playing the lute to keep the dragon at bay so it won't break his fall. As Mira is set out on the boat once again, she decides she can't go through with the marriage as she is in love with Arman and sings the ritual song.
Ждет невеста жениха, ждет как часа своего, в белый цвет облачена. Забирай, забирай, приходи, прилетай, на века отдана дева юная.
For a moment, all is quiet when she finishes and nothing happens. But the dragon appears and she willingly lets herself be taken. Rather than cower in fear and face the dragon's aggression, she lovingly accepts it and gives herself over to the dragon, which makes him submit to her in return. The shadow puppet show ends to reveal Arman telling the story to his daughter, and together with Mira, puts her to bed before flying off to the sunset. And the movie ends, the two of them floating in the clouds and kissing. Now, in full transparency, I have to admit that most of my knowledge on the Twilight series comes from other videos discussing the subject, such as Kennie JD's 4-part episode in the Bad Movies and Beat playlist. I mean, to be fair, I did read the first and like half of the second book when I was in high school, but they mostly just collected dust on my bookshelves, occasionally being used to kill spiders because I just found them so incredibly boring. And I couldn't stand Bella's lackluster character or her constant droning on and on and on about how pale and mysterious and godly Edward is. Like, girl, I got it the first 20 times you mentioned it, so can we just like get a move on with the story, please? And I just had to stop reading after the whole I'm gonna put myself in dangerous situations, possibly facing death, just so I can have hallucinations of my ex, since my entire existence is dependent on a man's love and without him I shall now perish part. The funniest thing to me is that my mom was actually the one to recommend this series to me, and she bought it, which is why I felt the whole obligation to force myself to read it. And I tried, I really tried to. But it took me an entire month to just get through the first book, and usually I would finish a book of that length within a week, 3 days if I like it, a day if I love it, and conveniently forget about my other responsibilities. So yeah, that was definitely an anomaly. And I'm not entirely sure if during the process of translating to Vietnamese I just decided to rewrite the entire book or what, because what I read was absolute garbage. So I have no idea why my mom loved it and recommended it as much as she did. But long as tangent aside, my whole point is that while yes, I have personally not watched or read the entire series, I, like any other person on the internet, have seen enough in passing to have a general understanding and have watched enough videos discussing the movie in length that I feel comfortable enough in dissecting the characters and themes and comparing them to Drakon. But for those that don't, there's my disclaimer, and with that out of the way, let's finally go ahead and get started by first discussing our male leads. Okay, this is the actual last thing. I just want to say real quick that there are a couple points in the video where the audio is very obviously different and possibly even out of sync with the video, because there are a couple points I wanted to add or change while editing, but now let's actually get started. At first glance, Arman and Edward seem to have a lot in common. Both are brooding, mysterious, and powerful men who are attracted to hapless human women that they like to creepily stare at, struggle with an inner beast that urges them to hurt said women, and attempt to commit suicide in the name of love. The difference lies in between how they handle themselves and treat those around them. Edward seems to have a god complex and views humans with disdain, holding himself above them while allowing them to worship him and his family, but doesn't ever engage, not even when he starts dating one himself. He just pulls her into his world with no regard or interest in learning about hers, which gives off real elitist vibes, where only those deemed worthy enough are allowed near him. And Bella, not like other humans, Swan, is the only one that meets that requirement, which means that Edward loves Bella despite her being human, rather than loving Bella who just happens to be a human. Whereas Arman is fascinated with humans from the second he finds a chest full of shadow puppets among the shipwreck. So much so that he wishes to remain a human and only embraces his dragon side once he sees his father being killed by the dragon slayer. And when Mira shows him the ways of being a human, he embraces it even when he doesn't fully think it's necessary or worth the effort. Arman also respects Mira's boundaries, which is more than Edward could ever say. But to be fair, Arman isn't perfect at this, especially in the beginning, as he stares at Mira while she's undressing, tending to her wounds, and tells her that she's beautiful. However, seeing as he's been living on a dragon island all by himself since he was a little kid with no interactions with the human world, it's understandable that he has no concept of social norms, but once he learns that it's wrong, he doesn't ever spy or invade her personal space again, especially when she's showering, and sleeps in his own room, only entering once when she had a nightmare and was screaming. Unlike Edward, who's had a century to learn proper etiquette, but still actively chooses to be a creep and break into Bella's room at night to watch her sleep, also resort to frequently stalking her because he can't resist the urge to, despite knowing full well that those are completely unacceptable behaviors. which is not only a show of bad character, but a severe lack of self-control, which doesn't exactly bode well for Bella, seeing as the only thing keeping him from killing her is his supposedly strong will and self-control of his. Even though from the moment he's met her, he's only been able to stay away for what, 1-2 weeks max, maybe, before coming back and giving her mixed messages of, stay away, I'm dangerous, but also come closer, I want you. It's especially selfish because Bella is initially clueless to just how dangerous he is. And if Edward truly cared for her safety and didn't want to do her harm, he should have just stayed away and moved his family to Italy or wherever he goes later, because, like I said, he doesn't have any established roots here. He doesn't have any connections or foundations of friends with humans. But even if he did, he should have stayed away because he knows what carnage he's capable of, and the danger that she could be in, not just from him, but all the vampires that surround him, because, as we see, they don't exactly have that great of control either. And yet he still chose to get close to her and let her fall in love with him, under the pretense that he was just your average, run-of-the-mill bad boy. And by the time he revealed to her what he truly was, she was already in too deep. Then again, Bella Swan is renowned for her stupidity and complete lack of survival instincts, so it probably wouldn't have made that much of a difference in her case, but that's beside the point. The point is that Edward selfishly and consistently makes decisions for Bella, ranging from who she should and shouldn't hang out with, to if and when he thinks she can become a vampire. And while he has valid concern behind his rationale, at the end of the day, Bella is her own person and should be respected enough to make her own decisions, no matter how dumb they are, and deal with the consequences. Besides, if he has an issue with her rash decision-making that's completely devoid of all logic and care for her own well-being, maybe don't go after high school girls when you yourself are like a 100-year-old vampire. That way you can actually act like her boyfriend rather than an overbearing, controlling dad. Arman, on the other hand, shows that he's a person of great character and self-control, selflessly choosing to isolate himself from the world to protect them from the dragon once he transformed for the first time and realized the damage his ancestor has caused. He witnessed the atrocities they committed firsthand, and, as a little boy, made a tough decision to stay on his self-imposed prison, not leaving even once to travel and explore the human world like he so desires. For over a decade, he closed himself off to the world and grew into adulthood, with only a monkey-dog hybrid thing to keep him company. But other than his initial transformation, has never stretched his wings, which takes Mira for surprise, because she's always envied the freedom that dragons have. And despite having the world at his fingertips, and the power to do and see whatever he pleases, because who's actually going to deny a dragon anything? He chooses to lock himself away because even as a young child with no life experience or mentor, he had enough compassion and strength to not only understand the immense power and destruction that comes with the dragon inside of him, but also repents and endure years of guilt for actions that he did not commit, and struggles on his own for control of the dragon. Also, side note, I really like the fact that they allowed the dragons to pass their memories through the generations, because not only does it allow Arman to understand the horrors committed without him actually having to participate himself, it also gives him a reason to be the stereotypical tortured soul that we always see in young adult romance, without him having to be hundreds of years old, aka he's not a creep. But anyways, once he met Mira, he urges her to stay in the pit for her own safety, but when she refuses, he doesn't try to force his will onto her or make decisions for her. Despite also having completely valid reasoning behind his rationale, he respects Mira enough to let her make her own risk assessment and decisions. Most notably, when he finds her hidden boat later and realizes that she'd been using them the entire time, he lets her go because he understood why she did it and begrudgingly respected her drive and ambition even when it deeply hurts him. This isn't really a valid argument, just an observation, because while neither of them are really my type, Arman definitely sells the whole intimidating yet attractive thing better than Edward, who usually just seems creepy or constipated. A lot of that probably has to do with Arman's voice and performance, especially in this scene.
Я же не думала, что...
Я тебя не виню. Все правильно. Ты должна меня бояться. Но ты сказала, я смогу победить дракона. И я боролся. Но зачем, если ты не веришь?
Арман!
Завтра на рассвете ты сядешь в лодку, поднимешь парус. Восточный ветер вынесет тебя в открытое море. Там корабли, тебя заметят.
Не уходи! А как же новый человек? Помнишь, я ведь нужна ему!
Здесь! Ты нужна только дракону! Уходи!
He didn't try to stop her by destroying her boat, and instead pushes her to leave by telling her the horrible fate that awaits her if she actually decides to stay. Though him getting the information from her and only using it in a moment of anger like this is definitely not the move, at the very least, he didn't mess with her vehicle like Edward supposedly did.
She decides to go up on his reservation, or at least she tries to. She gets in her car, and it does not work because Edward has done something to her car. But if you ever end up in a relationship where somebody tries to stop you from going somewhere by doing anything to your vehicle Run, sis! Anyway.
Probably the worst thing that they have in common is the fact that both of them attempted to commit suicide because they couldn't be with their lovers. It's actually pretty concerning when I think about how pervasive this notion of loving someone so much you'd be willing to die for them exists in the young adult romance genre. It's just an unhealthy standard to aspire to, and in general it's just a really sad and messed up thing to ever want from someone, especially the person you love. I wish it wasn't included in either movies at all, so I'm just going to briefly go over the differences between the two because I'm in no way trying to glamorize or even condone the actions, only speaking about the individual motivation and how that motivation, not the action, adds to each of their character. To put it simply, Edward planning to provoke the Valtteri to kill him shows his lack of care for others, whereas Arman planning to put a permanent end to the dragon line further shows his compassion for others. Edward, thinking that Bella had died, wanted to reveal the existence of vampires to the public, so that Valtteri would kill him, but he never actually thought about the consequences. So if he had succeeded, he would put all of vampire kind in danger, possibly lead to their death, and the deaths of thousands, if not millions of humans, if they were to engage in an all-out war. Arman, on the other hand, has always had the safety of humans in mind, and puts his needs last. I'm sure Mira leaving played a large role in his decision, but even before he ever got to know her, Arman has already shown a great level of empathy and remorse for the sacrificial brides that have perished. He was already planning on letting the dragon race die out with him by confining himself onto that island. But while I don't like the inclusion of these two scenes, I do find it very interesting that even in the way they choose to end their lives, it says a lot about their character and goes to show just how different the two of them really are. Now on to our female leads, though it's mainly just going to be about Mira because Bella's character is about as deep as a puddle and as interesting as a wet noodle. So let's get her out of the way first. Bella is a complete moron through and through with no common sense or instinct for survival who consistently and persistently puts herself into dangerous situations with men who explicitly warn her of their ability to maim her and yet decides to stick around because of her delusional sense of love and implicit trust in said men who she barely knows. And I kind of wish she had actually gotten hurt by one or both of them, just a little, so maybe it'd get to her thick skull that being told someone's barely able to restrain themselves from hurting you is not a show of their self-control or remotely romantic in any way, shape, or form. It's disturbing, frightening, and a big red flag that you should have gotten out of Dodge like yesterday. Which is why I like Drakon's approach a lot more, because in Mira's first encounter with him, she does get hurt. She has wounds from where the dragon grabbed her, as well as cuts and scrapes from being thrown down a pit. So from the get-go, she's very aware of the danger she's in, and has enough sense to still be afraid of Arman, and actually struggles with her fear and simultaneous love for him. Overall, Mira is a character with an actual personality, common sense, and has realistic reactions to the situation she finds herself in. When she's thrown to the pit and meets Arman for the first time, she's desperate to escape and lashes out at him for not helping her, but almost instantly forgives him and befriends him, then has a full-on breakdown when she thinks he's killed by the dragon because even though they don't know each other all that well, she's still bonded to him somewhat because she's going through a very traumatic experience, and he's her last link to humanity. When she realizes Arman can't, or won't, help her, she doesn't just sit back and wait for a man to come rescue her. She uses what she has to ensure her survival. And I like the fact that she's not instantaneously fantastic about it and actually struggles, because, well, she's the daughter of a duke. I mean, in some places I have seen that she's actually referred to as a princess, but either ways, that still makes her nobility, and she has really no reason to have any knowledge on what it takes to survive. So first she tries to survive Arman, and when that doesn't work, tries to make a rope braid out of her hair to climb out of the pit. And I will say in this scene, just like the sound of her tearing her hair out just brings goosebumps onto my skin every single time because it just makes me very uncomfortable. And that also doesn't work because she doesn't have enough leverage or the upper body strength to pull herself out. She's only able to escape based on a fluke because she freaks out when she thinks Arman is dead, and in her meltdown bashes a rock into the wall repeatedly and basically on accident smashes a hole through it where she can escape. She spends the first few moments of her freedom just screaming into the void for help and almost gets herself killed trying to set up a shelter. Then when she finds out Arman is actually the dragon and has an opportunity to kill him, she just can't bring herself to do it. Because, well, I think it would be difficult for most people to try and kill someone by bashing their skull in because that's pretty hardcore, especially when said person is completely knocked out and unconscious because they were trying to save you. Not to mention her cushy life as a royal or nobility beforehand. The fact that he was the one to kidnap her adds to the complexity of the situation, and it's something that she doesn't just forget or brush aside because she thinks he's hot, but rather because she's clever enough to deduce that he literally just risked his life to save her. So clearly, he's dealing with some type of struggle and doesn't actually want to kill her. And potentially could actually be her ride home. In fact, she's clever enough to befriend her captor and get him to gather her materials and then teach her the necessary skills to be able to escape. Even though she unexpectedly grows affectionate of him, she is smart enough to pack a bag, even including a weapon, just in case things go south and she needs to leave immediately. Which is more than Bella could ever even imagine doing to her poor precious vampire boyfriend. Now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure I heard somewhere that the reason why Bella felt so instantaneously attracted to Edward because vampires are purposely designed to be enticing to their prey, which lures them in with a false sense of security before they go in for the kill. So yeah, that's romantic. Whereas Arman and Mira's relationship feels not only more realistic, but also more passionate and poignant, because they don't love each other based on some weird predator-prey instinct, but rather despite of it. Arman never had a pull specifically towards Mira, because this dragon has a pretty indiscriminate urge to kill brides in general, and Mira definitely had no attraction to him at all in the beginning. Their affection towards each other only grew as they got to know each other and spent time surviving together on a secluded island with the common goal of beating Arman's dragon. Also on the point of being romantic, Arman is definitely leagues ahead of Edward, because he picks her flowers after she explains how they make her feel loved, literally creates fireworks for her and calls them celestial flowers, which isn't that just the cutest thing in the entire world? And most importantly, actually apologized for his mistakes, which might seem pretty mundane and something not worth mentioning, but you'd be surprised how difficult it is to find a male lead in the young adult romance genre who apologizes at all, or does so without somehow finding a way to pin some of the blame on the women. Now, to be fair, Arman does actually end up blaming Mira's lack of belief in him as the reason why he can't control his dragon near the end of the movie, which wasn't great, especially because they don't ever acknowledge that again, nor does he apologize. But the reason why I kept that clipped in was because I still think it applies for the most part. I'm not trying to argue that Arman is perfect or the best partner by any means, but rather he's just an improved version of Edward, and in that regard, he is by a long shot because he doesn't have a consistent pattern or history of being toxic and overall has shown himself to be a compassionate person. As such, I think he has the potential to grow and become better, and therefore stand by the fact that Arman is a better love interest than most in the young adult genre. Mira also shows her love in very thoughtful ways, like giving Arman a flute and teaching him a soothing lullaby, because she notices how strongly the dragon is affected by music, and probably in the most powerful way possible, by choosing him over her fear. Because as you can see in the scene where she confronts the dragon, she's absolutely still fearful of him, and her movements are all very jagged and stilted, especially when you compare to the final scene of the movie, and you can see how comfortable and confident she is in approaching the dragon. But despite her very valid fears, Mira chooses to believe in Arman and gives herself over to him completely. And in return, the dragon also submits to her. I really like that way of looking at a relationship, because it's not about who's stronger or who dominates who. When you're in a healthy relationship, you both make yourself vulnerable to the other person and implicitly trust them not to hurt you, even though making yourself vulnerable in the first place is what gives them the power to do so. You just have to believe that they have your best interest in mind and they won't take advantage of that trust. And my favorite part of all this is that Mira makes this decision after having real experience with the dragon. She isn't going to blind and instead is making an informed decision. Now, whether we think this decision is smart or rational is debatable, but at the end of the day, it's still her choice, which is more than basically any women in her time could say, because they definitely didn't choose to make a sacrifice, they were sacrificed. And even when the sacrificial ritual became a wedding tradition, it's still ultimately about a man giving a woman away like property. And Mira's father even says it just switched from being made to the powerful dragon to the most powerful men in the land.
Думаете, мы забыли темные времена, когда наши дочери доставались дракону? Теперь наши красавицы, наши славные дочери достаются достойным богатырям нашего княжества.
The women still passively accept their fate. They just have to hope that their groom is a somewhat decent person. And maybe, if you're really lucky, then he might actually love you. The wedding tradition is actually very symbolic of that, in which the women lay in that boat which is full of jewelry and basically the dowry that goes to the men, who then pulls them to shore, which makes Mira the only one to figuratively and literally stand for what she wants. She also becomes the first person to sing the ritual song rather than have it be sung to and about her. Also, I just have to say the scene of Mira's wedding and Arman jumping is just so beautifully shot and edited. Speaking of the visuals, I absolutely adored the dragon's design and any effect regarding him. The first transformation scene especially was epic and beautiful, with the orchestral piece and lines of fire stretching across his chest before he bursts into flames as the dragon appears.
Все.
I love how the flames always shows in his eyes before he's transforming, and that there's always a trail of embers following him. There was this one scene though where after he was injured and couldn't transform, it just really cracks me up every time I see it. He starts to float. It definitely does look very scary and like he's possessed. Which, if you change the editing in this movie, it could definitely work as a horror movie. But he just flops down and Mira nopes the hell out of that situation. And just the way he slumped over and her expression, I don't know, it's just funny to me. Besides that, there's actually quite a few really aesthetic scenes in this movie. It looks like it's right out of some fancy French perfume commercial. Like when she's leisurely taking a bath in a gorgeous waterfall, or when Arman showed her how to visualize the wind using flower petals, and then how to feel it with the kite.
Чужим, только тебе верю, открою все секреты, беспощадному зверю. Я знаю, что ты мне не враг, расправь свои крылья.
There's also two dream sequences. While I really liked the second one, I don't really think there's any place for the first one, where she dreams of Igor coming to rescue her, then turns into a sleeping Arman who forcefully holds her to him. The acting was probably the cringiest in this moment. It's pretty obvious this was to show us Mira's inner struggle between her love and fear of Arman. But I really don't think it needs to be force-fed to us like this so obviously. And seeing how this happens before the two of them even bond doesn't feel as impactful as the second scene, where she has a nightmare of being burned with the dragon. And that one is good to see her also struggling with her desires, because she's the one that approaches the dragon and reaches out to touch him, and everything seems fine until he turns on her. So just having this one would have served the movie a lot better. All that aside, I think it's pretty obvious that I absolutely love this movie. From the gorgeous visuals to the beautiful love story. I mean, this is the type of fantasy romance movie that teenage me would have killed to have grown up with, but instead, all I got was Twilight. And from all the disparaging comments I've made in this video, I think it's pretty apparent my feelings on that and how disappointed I was that garbage is what swept the nation and became considered as top tier young adult romance. I'm sure this video is starting to get long and I should really end it here, but apparently this movie is getting a sequel, which I'm obviously interested in because there are parts of the lore that I would love to see explored a little more. For example, is Mira and Arman's daughter actually a dragon? Because so far we've only seen 2 dragons and they've both been male. So is it just a coincidence that the first child is born female? And are there such thing as female dragons? Would that then mean that the method of childbirth is what determines the sex and dragonhood of a child? Or is Arman the first dragon to figure out why they have a human form to begin with, and that all his children, female or male, will turn out to be dragons regardless? I'd also like to know if time moves differently on the island, because Arman was just a small child when the dragon slayer killed his father, but only aged to be a young man in his, 20s? By the time the dragon slayer's grandson is old enough to marry. And we know that Arman isn't going to be youthful forever, like Edward, because you can see his dad was middle-aged before he was killed. And we know in general that dragons will eventually die, because for one, they're on an island made of ancient dragon remains, 2, they need to steal prize in order to continue their race, and 3, the village never knew there were more than one dragon in existence at any time. Which also makes me wonder if after the dragon sons grow up, do they just kill their fathers? Or is it that after each dragon makes one sacrifice, it fulfills that urge inside of them, and therefore they don't need to steal more? So it's like a one-time deal type of situation? Now, all those questions aside, the main thing that I actually really want to talk about was this article I found talking about the sequel. I only stumbled upon it when I was looking for pictures to make a thumbnail, and I saw this post that I had never seen before, and it was in Chinese, which really intrigued me. To my surprise, I learned that not only is this movie getting a sequel, but it will be a collaborative effort between Russia and China, because it was an unexpected hit in China while flopping in Russia. So I wanted to find a more recent article to confirm this fact. That's when I found this 2018 article that I'll link down below, because it was definitely interesting to say the least. The author definitely views this movie through a religious lens, which is completely fine, just not my forte, so I won't be touching on any of those aspects, which in essence is the entirety of the second half of the article in which she discusses the prevalence and consequences of having dragon imagery in the media. Instead, what really caught my attention was just how much she misunderstood this movie. If it was just that, that's fine. My problem lies with how much she misconstrues or altogether fabricates and sensationalizes certain facts. Some of which makes me question if she even watched the movie or only saw a couple of clips in the trailers and decided she hates what she thinks it stood for. Most of her misinformation is centered around Arman. She starts with the article by calling him a foul-mannered dragon man who spreads terror and death. Then goes on to criticize Mira for being a sappy little thing with no common sense or sympathy for the sacrificial virgins burnt alive by her lover. Except funny thing, Arman never burned or caused anyone's death. His ancestors did, and he then inherited their memories of doing so and repents for their crimes by self-isolating himself on an island, but in no way, shape, or form has he actually been directly responsible for anyone's death. So maybe she just overlooked that and instead subscribed to the notion that children are responsible for their parents' crimes, in which case I would still disagree. But I think, again, she just didn't watch the movie, because throughout the article she makes it seem as though Arman is some monster on the prowl for his next kill only stopping because he fell in love with Mira, and now no longer decimates the region of virgins. She makes no mention of the dragons before him, who were the actual cause of all this harm, and instead pins all the blame on Arman, and makes it seem like he's constantly on the hunt for princesses, killing them left and right. Despite the fact that we've only ever seen one dragon at a time, and seeing as dragons burn the brides in the first place to create dragon babies, we can deduce that at most there's only ever one bride in every generation that's taken, which doesn't make it any less horrific, but also means no one dragon is responsible for all the bride's death, and Arman certainly has not been going around indiscriminately killing bride after bride before he met Mira, because again, Arman has been isolating himself on this island the entire time and has never killed a single person, let alone decimating an entire region of people. To make matters worse, not only does she fail to mention the dragon lineage, she's seemingly unaware of its existence, and implies that Arman is a new threat to the kingdom, stating that his relationship to Mira would have remained a private affair, except for the troubling scene where it becomes evident the entire kingdom has submitted to the Dragon Prince. And the scene in question was toward the end of the film, where the producers hired British artist Simon Beck to make an enormous snow dragon on a frozen river in Siberia, which was a sign of submission by the people to honor their new dragon ruler. Yeah, funny thing though, this supposed near end of film scene actually occurs within the first 5 minutes of the movie, which again begs the question, did you actually watch the movie? Because Arman explained that this was a tradition of old to appease his ancestors, aka before Arman was ever born, aka not dedicated to him specifically after he began dating Mira. Calling him a prince and a ruler was also an odd choice because he doesn't rule over anything as a dragon. Do people fear and make sacrifices to the dragons? Yes, but that makes them no different than any of the gods or deities that ancient civilizations worshipped. And you wouldn't call them the kings or emperors of those civilizations, just the entities that they worshipped and made sacrifices to. He also rules over nothing as a human, because it's not clear if Mira reunites with her family by the end and explains the situation to them, so the only people who know that the dragons have a human form is Iker's family, who only pass that knowledge down to bloodline. Besides that, she clearly also thinks very little of Mira, calling her a sappy little thing and a silly princess who defiantly returns to her dragon and seals her fate. Which again, how smart her decision to return actually was is debatable, but I do think it's a little disingenuous, completely downplaying all of her accomplishments, to not even acknowledge how she was able to escape the pit by herself, tricked Arman into helping her scavenge the shipwreck to find maps, and have him teach her how to sail, which leads to her ultimately saving herself. Not to mention taming a literal dragon, and instead just dismissing her as some silly little princess with no common sense. I'm also not the biggest fan of her using the term defiant when referring to Mira's decision to not be treated like property and forced into arranged marriage. But then again, she does seem to have a soft spot for Iker, calling him a terrifically handsome prince who's left behind wailing for Mira, as well as a perfectly lovely fiancé whom she dumps for a big lizard. Both of which paints a vastly different picture than just saying Mira broke off her arranged marriage, which is what actually happened. Like most marriages at the time, they weren't based off of love, but rather power and wealth, with Mira's father even saying in the beginning that they'll eventually grow to love each other.
Две соть. Я знаю, что тебе нужно. Тебе нужен Игорь. Ты полюбишь его, он полюбит тебя. Поверь отцовскому сердцу.
Not to mention the fact that the only things Mira knew about Iker was 1, he's a grandson of the Dragon Slayer, 2, he has the biggest horse in the land.
Ты своих женихов прогнала и кукуешь, а у Игоря конь выше всем в качестве.
Вот и шла бы ты за коня замуж.
And 3, that's literally it. So he's definitely not some tragic, jilted lover that she makes him out to be. Also, calling a perfectly lovely fiancé is, a choice, because from the very limited scene he shows up in, he leaves much to be desired. From the beginning, we see the only accolade he possesses is being the grandson of the Dragon Slayer with no accomplishments of his own. Which I have to say I never quite understood why some people are celebrated for being related to greatness when they have shown none themselves. and because of his overinflated ego, decides to have his men chant the ritual song, which hasn't been sung since the dragon has been killed, which obviously confuses the crowd and ends up causing this entire mess to begin with. He claims it's to honor his grandfather, but I really think it's an obvious grab for attention and to ensure that everyone knows who he is. Though I'm not sure his lineage is something to be proud of exactly, seeing as his grandfather was also a selfish and egotistical person. First by exaggerating his accomplishments, probably because it sounds more epic and heroic to say, after an intense, ferocious battle, he felled the beast with one mighty blow, rather than saying he just found out that the dragon had a human form, snuck up behind it, and stabbed it in the back, which is what really happened. He then decides to keep that knowledge a secret, which he only passed down to his sons, which is a pretty shitty thing to do for a variety of reasons. Mainly that this isn't some secret family recipe. It's knowledge that can mean life or death for some people, and seeing as his lover was the one who suffered that fate, you think it'd make him compassionate enough to want to spare others the same. But instead he chooses to pass it down to his bloodline so they can play hero in the future. I mean, if he didn't actually think dragons were a threat anymore, he could have just told him the heroic version without revealing how to find the island and kill the dragon. But he did.
Ничего тебе от деда не досталось. Даже секрета этого. Думаешь, не знаю этого секрета, дедова? Мира должна мне с берега своей любовью какой-то знак подать, что-то вроде маяка, и мы поймем, куда править.
Сама говорила, что без любви остров тут не найти.
And seemingly only to the men in his family, which is even more fucked up, seeing as women are the ones that are actually affected and the ones that have to deal with the consequences, aka being burned alive. And yet letting the men play hero by potentially coming to the rescue in time is more important than equipping the women with knowledge that could save them. Makes sense. But because of his stupidity and pride, Arman is summoned, and when Mira is taken, he tries to pull her boat back, which isn't a horrible idea. However, he's stupid enough to stand still as the ship is falling back to Earth and would have been smushed to death if his helmsman didn't pull him out of the way. Then as they are on the ship, the only thing we see him do is drink and then complain about the fog, and after a couple days wants to go home.
Игорь, послушай, столько дней с поднятым парусом ходим. В тумане это верная смерть.
Калми, черт с ним, с туманом! Все, кормчий, довольно с меня! Разворачивай корабль, возвращаемся. Стой!
And yes, I said days, not years, not months, not even weeks of sailing. Mere days in the fog, and he's unable to cope. Apparently, not being smart enough to pack enough supplies to last them for more than a couple of days, while they're out on a voyage into the middle of the ocean on a rescue mission, and now wants to run home. When his helmsman intervenes and states that he will take command so that they can find Mira, since Igor clearly does not have the skills to lead, not only does Igor not show any concern for Mira's well-being, he is instead butthurt that someone would dare insinuate lacks any capability his grandfather possessed and holds the man at knife point, telling him to turn the ship around since he has not received a sign of Mira's love which would guide him to the island. So surely she must be dead.
Если нет знака, что это значит? Значит, и ее уже нет. Ты слышишь, да? Разворачивай корабль. Мы идем домой.
And then, I don't know, the possibility that she perhaps doesn't love a man she barely knows, and maybe if you're on a rescue mission to save someone, you should look for more than a couple of days before giving up. All of this could have been avoided if he wasn't so self-absorbed that he thought Mira was absolutely in love with him because he's Igor, grandson of the Dragon Slayer, and instead brought Mira's father or sister along since love is what guides the way, but it's not specified what type of love is necessary. Then when she decides she won't marry him because she doesn't love him, not only does he not respect her decision, and still try to force her into marriage with him.
Мира, что ты делаешь?
Я тебя не люблю.
Что?
Я не люблю тебя!
Тяни! Помогай!
And his first reaction was to reach for his sword when Mira began to sing, and I don't really think that was actually meant for the dragon, since he never once even drew his sword when Arman came and instead grabbed a flag to use as javelin. So that's not alarming at all, but he claims that he's the one that saved Mira.
Мира, я искал тебя, я нашел тебя, не дури!
Я люблю дракона!
Despite the fact that Mira was the one that actually bested the dragon, Mira was the one who signaled where she was, and the one that sailed all the way out to them, while Igor was being a big baby who couldn't stand being out in the water for a couple of days and wanted to run home. So if I had to choose between a big lizard man who respects me as a person and is willing to die to protect others, versus the big man-child who resorts to force and violence the second things don't go his way, I think I'm gonna have to take my chances with the big fire-breathing dragon. Thank you very much. She ends the article with a statement that has me semi-agreeing with the first half, but completely disagreeing in the second, because would you be surprised if I told you she got yet another thing wrong? Probably not at this point, but let's continue anyway. She starts off by stating that viewers, especially younger ones, found the film fabulously romantic. What they didn't notice, judging by their comments, were the jarring implications of submitting to evil or to superior strength fear, and fatalism. And to an extent, I agree, because I think how you interpret this movie can go one of two ways. You either see it through a more romantic, or as some could argue, a naive lens, and see it as a love story about two people who learn to overcome their fears and, despite their power difference, make themselves equally vulnerable to one another. Or you can view it through a more cynical, or as some could argue, a realistic view, and see it as a story about a power struggle and a girl who possibly has some form of Stockholm syndrome that deludes herself into loving a deadly dragon. I think it's pretty obvious how the author and I each view the movie. However, just because I don't agree doesn't mean her view is wrong, as that part is really all up to personal interpretation. So now we'll get into the second half where she actually is wrong, as she concludes with, not to mention, dumping a perfectly lovely fiancé for a big lizard and rejecting family and country. I already gone over dumping Igor at length, so we don't have to rehash that. We're not going to pretend Mira rejected or was rejected by her family and country for choosing to be with Arman. Firstly, with most marriages at the time, and even in some nowadays, when a woman gets married, she is no longer considered part of her father's family and is now instead part of her groom's, hence the whole giving the bride away. So even if Mira was to marry Igor or any other man, it would have been expected of her to live her new life and start a new family, which she did. And if she wants to visit, her dragon husband can fly her in anytime, seeing as they don't live far away. And even if they did, he's a dragon, so that doesn't matter. She did as they encouraged her to, marrying, and for love, as both her father and sister state that that's what would make them happy.
Будь с тем, кого ты любишь. Почувствуй и доверяй сердцу своему. Остальное...
Ты ведь противилась свадьбе с Игорем, я же помню.
Глупость, я говорила, сестренка. Я-то думала, к Игорю не любовь у тебя, а он князем хочет стать. Теперь я вижу. Любите. Будь счастлива, сестра. Тогда я буду.
In fact, it's more concerning just how quickly they accept her decision, her father saying just a little too casually, so that's what your heart desires, and her sister yelling at Igor to not hurt the dragon as he flies off with Mira.
Так вот, что решило твое сердце.
Игорь, не смей!
To be fair, it's only been two. Well, actually just one generation with no brides being taken, so I guess their culture is still pretty used to having the dragon taking a bride. The only difference being she chooses to go this time. But it's not like she's done some heinous thing or turned her back on them, and they certainly didn't reject her either. As for her country, by the author's own line of thinking, Arman is their new dragon ruler, so the princess marrying him shouldn't be an issue, and if anything, it's her royal duty. And even if she was to abdicate her crown to live on the island with Arman, she still ended up saving her country and putting a permanent end to the suffering of the brides at the hands, or more accurately, the claws, of the dragons. Something that the Dragon Slayer clearly failed to do by having little hybrid babies or something, as she so eloquently put it. Also, this is probably me being nitpicky, but it's actually just one baby, not multiple. Plus, hybrid babies make me think of the donkey dragon babies in Shrek, so there's that. But like I said previously, we're not even sure if their child is a dragon or not. Even so, if we were to play out both scenarios, it would make a difference. If she turns out to be a dragon, it's highly unlikely she'd be a danger to humans, seeing as she has a human mother and a dragon father who adores humans ever since his fascination with shadow puppets and stories began. Something she shares as she repeatedly asks Arman to retell the story again and again. If she turns out to be a human, then the dragon bloodline would continue to be diluted until it ceases to exist. In either scenario, Mira found the most peaceful way to end the line of angry, dangerous dragons, where the violent means of the Dragon Slayer failed to do so. So no, Mira absolutely did not turn her back or reject her family and country by choosing to be with Arman. Probably the most ironic thing about all of this is the only reason she gives for Igor being a supposedly lovely fiance is because he's good looking, which is basically the antithesis to the moral of Beauty and the Beast, which is, you know, don't judge a book by its cover. It's a little ironic, seeing as she probably wrote this article without actually seeing the movie. But I'm pretty sure this video has gone on long enough, and it'd be a miracle if this is anything under an hour. So if you actually made it all the way through, thank you so much for watching. But with all that being said, I've been me, aka miizmi, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye!